We are the Kittrells. My name is Eric, and this is Megan.
My name is Annie. I'm 5 and I love unicorns.
This is Will.
How old are you? 2? And give a thumbs up. Yay.
I just got him up one morning out of the crib. It was just a normal day. I picked him up and he was in a lot of pain, and it was just weird and unexplainable. And I just knew, something was not right. So I called our pediatrician. X-rays came back fine. I assumed blood work would come back fine too, and kind of stopped worrying about things. And then she called us that afternoon and said that the blood work had shown some irregular cells. So she wanted to refer us to one of her friends who was a child oncologist. We thought, well, we'll go and we'll take this next step to show that everything's fine.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
We took Will to the oncologist. He just said, we can't rule out leukemia. And that's when everything kind of just broke. I had a brother who passed away when he was 3 with cancer. So I immediately think the worst.
Still in the middle of that terrible phone call, he sat with us and he prayed with us. The first of many times that we saw God in the middle of all this, where he placed that doctor directly in our lives as our first connection to the world of oncology. July the 21st, he officially got diagnosed with AML, acute myeloid leukemia, and we were admitted to the hospital, and from then on, everything started happening really fast.
Yeah.
We stayed in the hospital, got the chemo, recovered, and then we were released for a week at a time.
We stayed in the hospital 67 out of 100 days, I believe.
And Will did wonderful. He did great during his chemo.
He seemed to just encourage everybody he came across.
I had an unexplainable peace through the whole process. The only way you can explain it is by the power of prayer.
From my hometown, from her community at her school, definitely from Greer First, you count on those prayers and we could feel them. Every step of the way we could feel them.
Every step of the way.
At the end of our first round of chemo, they got some gene tests back, and he was diagnosed with this gene mutation that gave him a really poor diagnosis.
It was not a question of if leukemia would come back, it was when, because he had that gene mutation.
I can pinpoint that as the worst day of my life.
That made us question whether he was going to,
we didn't know
whether we were going to survive it with him.
We didn't know if we were going to bring him home. A verse that was meaningful to us during this whole time was Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. And that kind of became our verse for this whole ordeal.
You couldn't control anything. We had no say in how this was going to go. So we just really tried to intentionally be still and just let God do what he was going to do.
We just mourned that day. And then the next day we woke up and we were like, okay, we're going to do this.
Let's figure out how to beat it. The only thing to give him a fighting chance was to do a bone marrow transplant.
My first worst fear always when you have kids is something is going to happen to them. And then something has happened to Will. And then we got into it, and my worst fear was, well, this is going to be leukemia. It was leukemia. Once we realized it was leukemia, my worst fear was bone marrow transplant. My worst fears just kept getting presented to us, and God said, okay, these are your worst fears. Let me show you how I'm going to take care of them. And he took care of every single one of them.
What we have to do next is the bone marrow transplant in Charleston to give him the best chance of surviving. He did more chemo down there, and then his bone marrow transplant day was November the 9th. And what's really cool is to think about this anonymous man. He donated his bone marrow, and it just gave Will another chance at life.
One of the toughest things was not having Annie there with us because our family wasn't whole.
So once he had his transplant, we had to stay in the Charleston area for 100 days. So Annie was able to come down and live with us down there, and we were our family again.
That was a big triumph. I think for us, that brought us closer.
As we move past the transplant, each day gets better for him.
It's good to be home.
It's so good to be home. And Will is healthy, and he's his happy, normal little self. We can't answer the question, why does this happen? I don't think anybody can ever answer that. But we have seen the goodness of God through this.
We've seen God's hand work in this situation as we look back.
From people hearing Will's story, from ways that Will has encouraged people in the hospital. You can't tell Will's story without talking about God. And it's a story of look how big God is and look what he can do.